Hi folks, my name's Raven, and I'm making this extremely amateur video, just me and my old laptop, because a friend of mine said that something about how I should have all this documented and archived because there are a lot of queer elders who are going by, and it's great to have their stories. And so maybe it would be great if they could, if I could put my story on some sort of video, meaning could the Luddite geezer, that would be me, actually attempt to create something that people could listen to. And so I'm trying to do this. I apologize already for the amateur recording, but here I am. My name is Raven, and I'm, among other things, I'm intersex. What that means, intersex people are born with a number of genetic conditions, a wide variety of genetic conditions, that mean that various bits of our bodies, from some people their genitals and some people their endocrine system, is partly male and partly female and somewhere in the middle. And we physically have traits of both, naturally. And I am also transgender because I was raised female, and I did transition to living as male. I'm almost 60 now, and first 30 years of my life I lived as a woman, second 30 years of my life I've lived as a man, and I'm really neither. Exactly. We'll get to that. My story, this is only my story. It does not describe that of any other intersex person, because we are all so different. We have many different histories. So I can only speak for me, and my story is as much a spiritual story as it is a political story. I am a Northern Tradition shaman, which means that I practice the shamanism of my ancestors of Northern Europe. And if you're looking for a purely political or a purely sociological story that has no mention of spirituality or any of that woo-woo nonsense in it, this is not the video for you, and you should probably go before you get too disappointed. Because for me, my gender situation is not separable from my spiritual situation, my spiritual life. But we'll get to that. I was born, 1966, to my genitals at the time of birth were close enough to female normal that my parents didn't particularly make a big deal out of or notice it, which is good, because if they had been ambiguous, I would not have been allowed to keep them. I know my parents, and also judging from what happened when things did go sideways, they would have been right down with amputate all that shit. And so I'm lucky. I'm lucky that didn't happen to me. That childhood genital mutilation is something that is an issue in the intersex demographic. It's a lot better than it used to be. And there's a lot of activists who have been working very hard and fighting very hard with the medical system to try to make that something that doesn't happen anymore. And so I'm lucky that did not happen to me. But it didn't exempt me. I remember when I was 10 years old, this is kind of where the story starts. When I was 10 years old, I was at my grandma's house, and I was reading my grandma's old books, and there was a book on myths and mythical creatures, and it listed and described all these mythical creatures. And this was a book that, smelled old when I was 10, so that was, 50 years ago? And it mentioned things like unicorns and pegasi and dragons and satyrs and all that sort of thing. And then in there, amidst all these, it talked about hermaphrodites. The hermaphrodite, who is both male and female, and da-da-da-da-da. And the story of Hermaphroditos and Hermes and Aphrodite and all that sort of thing. And I'm reading this at the age of 10 and having this really strange feeling. That's me. And there's no reason for this. No one has said anything to me. My parents didn't know. Nobody knew. Nobody knew at all. And yet, I read this book, I see this, and I know. Except, this is a mythical beast. This is a mythical creature in among unicorns and dragons, and so couldn't be, right? Couldn't be. 2 years later, puberty hits. I have a double puberty. Seriously, I grew breasts. I grew chest hair and body hair. I grew facial hair. I started to have a very irregular menstrual cycle, but it was a menstrual cycle, and I also had some changes going on down there at the same time that were that I did not tell my parents about because by that time I was 12, I didn't trust any adult in the world for good reasons, and I just didn't talk about it. It was my secret. It's years later when I was sexual, when I was having sex with people, and I am pansexual. I tend to be more interested in masculine people than feminine people, and I tend to be most interested in people who are in between. I kind of like my own kind best. However, that turns out people who are androgynous are the ones who really ring my chimes. But anyway, at some point in my early explorations, I was in bed had a one night stand with some guy, and he said that it was the first time he'd ever encountered female genitals where, as he put it, it was actually a mouthful. Just saying. Anyway, so this is all going on, and really, they said it was a myth, but it came and got me anyway. And at the time, again, I felt like it was something strangely magical. I was not saying, "Oh, this is terrible, this is terrible." Something in my head was saying, "Actually, this is really cool." And more than that, this is right. This is right and proper. This is what is supposed to be happening to me. This is who I am. This is what I am. Yes, the fact that this mythical situation actually is happening, yeah. On some level, I knew it. And unfortunately, however, my parents noticed, and my mother freaked out, seriously freaked out. And she dragged me to the doctor, and the doctor, they never used the word intersex. They did not test me for anything. They basically said that there were hormone problems, and they tried to shoot me up with something that I had a terrible, terrible allergic reaction to. I was later to find out, after enduring a few more of these tests in my adult life, that this was corticosteroids. And then I have a very, very bad reaction to corticosteroids, and corticosteroids is actually the first-line treatment for congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is a condition I would later be diagnosed with. At the time, they never said that. They just said, "Oh, we'll try this." Oh, that went really wrong. All right, put the kid on high-dose estrogens. Here, we're going to give you a whole lot of estrogens. And so I was put on the equivalent of birth control pills that were very high in the estrogen. And it was horrible for many reasons. I became extremely depressed. My body does not like estrogen, and in fact would prefer not to have much of it at all. I developed lupus. Autoimmune diseases run in my family. A number of my family members have developed autoimmune diseases, including my mother. So perhaps it would have happened anyway, but it was definitely triggered by the high-dose estrogens. And I have lupus to this day, and it's not fun. It's not great. There's a lot. That's a whole other soapbox. Living with lupus, not fun. So, hey. And also the high-dose estrogens over the next couple of years not only gave me lupus, but made me grow very large breasts, which I did not like at all. I think I would have been all right with smaller ones, but it gave me really enormous ones, and I just hated that. I hated it incredibly. Now, the political, medical situation at the time, this is going to be a spiritual story, but I can't get away from the politics of the time, is that intersex children were supposed to be fixable. You were supposed to assign them to a gender, or make sure that the course correct them onto a gender, and as long as they were forced to be stereotypical, as long as we were forced to be stereotypical, we would turn out to be completely healthy members of that gender, ideally heterosexual, and all all anomalies. Just tell the kid not to say anything about it. And so there's a lot of shame around. Don't tell anyone your medical condition. Don't let them know. And there was a lot of forced hair plucking and things like this. And yeah. Um, and and my parents got that. They got that memo from the doctors that if, as long as they made sure I was stereotypically feminine, which I wasn't a big tomboy, but I wasn't particularly feminine. But as long as I did all the girly girl things, I'd be fine. So it was off to the forced feminization program for me. I was enrolled in charm school. Oh my God, charm school. I was enrolled in dance lessons. Everything was, my wardrobe was controlled to make sure it was feminine enough. All this kind of stuff. My mother tried to explain to me at the top of her lungs with a stick why I was supposed to act in a particular way, and she couldn't quite get across to me how it was I was supposed to act, and I was kind of clueless. Um, but it was pretty horrible, and for all the good it did, it didn't do any good. It didn't. It really didn't. Um, nah, nah. Um, but they believed it at the time, and I believed it because these were the grown-ups around me telling me that this was not supposed to happen, that this was not okay, and that I couldn't tell anyone ever, and I should take my medication, take my hormones, and everything will be fine. Everything was not fine. I was very upset. However, I went on with my life, determined to, because I'd been told that I could not fail at being female. Most intersex children are assigned female. It's easier, especially if they have ambiguous genitalia. They are mostly assigned female because it's easier to make a hole than a pole. It's really stupid. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we are. So I got married. I dated men. I got married. I attempted really, really hard to get pregnant because this was the final thing, final success in being a woman. I was going to have a baby. I didn't really want a baby, but it proved, it would have proved that I had succeeded in this thing that I had been told I was failing at. Um, and the problem was that it was hard to get pregnant. It was hard to stay pregnant. My uterus was malformed. It was tipped way, way, way back, and it was what they referred to then as horned, meaning it was kind of heart-shaped instead of pear-shaped. And which I think, having a horned uterus, I think that's actually, for someone who's a pagan man, I think that's actually kind of cool. But that aside, it lasted. It did not make it all the way through pregnancy, and my daughter was born with a great deal of medical help and hormonal support. My daughter was born prematurely. I am glad she is in the world. I really am. I hated the whole experience. It was horrible, but I'm glad she is in the world, and that having a child at all made it worth it. I just wish I could have done it the other way. I wish that I'd been able to have somebody else do that part of it, and I could have done the other half of it. But hey, um, and after that, everything just sort of shut down, and I was sterile by the time I was 20. And a few years later, after that, I was at a gathering. I was at a pagan gathering somewhere, and I was there was some kind of a talk that was going to happen about being between male and female. I thought it was going to be some kind of a spiritual woo-woo thing about, the sacred marriage within or something like that. And it was not. It was an intersex person who got up and talked about themselves and their story and how they were proudly both. And this was really who they were. And I'm sitting between my husband and my boyfriend, neither of whom know, because I have kept it a shameful secret from both of them and said, yeah, I just have hormone issues. Pluck, 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 pluck. And yes, my genitals are a little, yeah, oversized. That's just life, right? And it shocked me. It knocked me for a loop. I had never seen anyone say that you could be proud of this. And not only that, she said, this is a sacred thing. This is a sacred thing to be. We are sacred people in the world. And it just blew me away. And I wandered out of there just as if the gods had come down and kicked me in the head and said, wake up. Within a year, I had broken up amicably with the husband and the boyfriend, and was on my way through my gender journey. That took several more years. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I went to endocrinologist after endocrinologist. That was mostly a mistake, because the problem is that story I told you, that lie I told you that the doctors were telling the parents, that as long as you are very stereotypical gender program with your child, they'll be normal. They will not ever do anything else. It's not true. Some intersex people are completely identified with the gender they were assigned. Some aren't. It's a crapshoot. And there's no way to predict which way they're going to go. And however, in order to not give the lie to their lies, at that time, if you mentioned that you were intersex, or if you had an intersex condition, or you were tested and found to have one, they wouldn't let you have sex reassignment, because that would be giving the lie to their lies. This is a long time ago, okay? This is the 80s, a long time ago. In early 90s, that sort of thing. And the endocrinologist didn't know what to do with me. They really didn't know what to do with me, because I wanted to go off the estrogens. And they kept trying to they diagnosed me with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. I have that. And I went and looked it up, and I was like, yep, intersex condition. Okay, great. So what can we do? What are my options? And they said, well, you're allergic to corticosteroids. You know, these medications you don't do well with, so you just have to stay on the estrogens. And I said, oh, I want to stop. And they said, well, that's not a good idea, because then you'll masculinize. And I started thinking about it. And at one point, one doctor gave me a shot of something, and I danced home through Boston. I was walking from the doctor's office to the T-stop, and I was dancing through the community gardens, and it was wonderful. It was like the sun came out, and I realized, wow, maybe I've been low-grade depressed for decades now. And I went back and said, whatever the hell that was, you give me more of that. And they said, we can't do that. That's testosterone. You can't have that because you're intersex. And you've been assigned female. And you have to stay that way. You cannot be allowed to masculinize. So I went home, and what you have to understand at this point, I was dating a trans woman. I had met a wonderful trans woman, and we had fallen in love. And the thing about if you have any gender issues and you are sleeping with another trans person who has dealt with their gender issues and is out and proud, you cannot stay in the closet. All your gender stuff is going to come out. It's going to come marching across the bed. If you're sleeping with a trans person, you will be, and you are anything other than just 100% non-trans, 100% normal, male or female, you will be dealing with your stuff. And I was dealing with my stuff. So I went home, and I said, so they won't let me transition because I'm intersex. And my girlfriend of the time, my eventual wife, I did marry her. We have been together for 34 years. That's great. She said, well, find another endocrinologist. You can go to mine and tell them don't tell them about the intersex stuff. Just, go to a therapist, do the normal trans stuff. Act as if you were just a normal trans person. They probably won't find out. And if you go to, like, mine didn't do any tests to see if I was intersex. They just took my word for it. Once my therapist wrote a letter, it was all good. And I said, well, I don't know what to say. And she said, honey, I got you. So she basically walked me through what to say and how to go in as someone who is requesting sex reassignment. And I certainly had gender dysphoria. I was tired of I had given up on all the femininity stuff some time ago, and I was basically walking around as a butch dyke with a um, trans woman girlfriend, which was interesting in queer circles at the time. But we got on well, so the heck with it. Um, and the long and the short of it is that I did transition from male to female, but it was a long period of time. At the time there was a lot of gatekeeping you had to do, and so and meanwhile I'd gone off the estrogens, and I started bleeding and bleeding and bleeding and bleeding and bleeding, and it was because my the progesterone was just going crazy. I know more about a progesterone cycle now than probably anyone who's not an OBGYN. But I started bleeding badly. It was going on for about 50% of the time. It was enormous gouts of blood. I could barely walk. The whites of my eyes were super white. I could barely walk to the bus stop in the corner, and I ended up in the hospital a couple of times with them, just with the doctors just stopping it. And the final time I ended up in the hospital was because I was passing out, and my wife took me to the hospital. And I remember being in the hospital and being about to pass out and being completely calm and thinking to myself, I might not wake up. Hmm, okay. Just complete. Here I am on the verge of death and on the verge of bleeding out. And okay. I just was completely calm and very much at peace. And I passed out and I had a vision. Yeah, a vision. Now, okay, here comes the serious woo woo stuff, guys. So, those of you who don't want to hear this, you can go now if you haven't already gone. But I had a vision, and there was a goddess who had been following me, talking to me, dealing with me, pushing me to do things for my entire life. Like, she started coming around. I remember her coming around at 3 and 4 in first in my dreams, and then occasionally when I was awake. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? Only she would tell me to do good things. She's like, learn to sing, learn to do this. Don't go into that educational program. Go into this one. This one will help more. And so she gently guided me for a lot of things, and she also forcibly pushed me. Occasionally, she would come in and put her foot down and say, "Don't do that. That's wrong and unhealthy. And stop doing that. Stop that. Down. Stop that. Drop it." That's this sort of thing, because I was in many ways kind of a beastie, kind of a wild thing, and I didn't know who she was, but I knew she was a death goddess because sometimes I could smell the death and I could feel the death. So, but I would be like, "Are you Kali? Are you Hecate?" Rumpelstiltskin game, no. And then during this vision, when I was close to death, I was bleeding out. And this is my near death experience. And she appeared, and she'd always been masked, or she had a face on, but it was not her real face. I saw her real face for the first time, and it was half beautiful woman and half skeletal rotting corpse, carrion beetles, the whole thing. And she strung me up like a butchered animal, and she took me apart. And to this day, I remember I've written about this for the last 30 years. This was 30 years ago. I've written about this in multiple accounts since then. I still have a visceral, physical memory that makes me kind of shiver of her skeletal hand going in up under my ribs and clicking against my ribs and grabbing my heart and tearing it out. And she did something to it, and then she put it back, and it was different. And she put me back together, and I was different. I came out. I could see things and hear things even more. I'd always been talked to plants, but now I could hear them breathe, um, so to speak. So to speak. Plants don't breathe, but they do have a rhythm and a life to them, and I could communicate with all kinds of things. And there were dead people, and there were other gods, and it was all this stuff, and it was like the volume had been turned up, like the broadband had been installed. Apparently, and I have learned that this is the case, you have to be very close to death to get that, if you will, 220 upgrade. And there's an attrition rate, there's a risk there. You might not make it. It's the shamanic road, rather the classic shaman road, rather than the yogic road, which is 40 years on a mountaintop. So I woke up and I was glad to be alive, very glad to be alive, and I knew who she was. I'd seen that face before, and I looked her up, and she was Hel, or Hela, the Norse Germanic um, death goddess of my ancestors. I have a lot of the majority of my ancestors are Germanic and Scandinavian and that kind of thing. Gee, do I look it? Um, anyway, that was an experience. Everything was different after that, and I started asking people about it. And I was a dumb white American. I'd been to some pagan stuff. I'd been doing pagan stuff for at least a decade, but nothing like this. It had not prepared me for something like this. And people said, "Oh, that sounds like a shamanic thing," and I went and read about that. I read sociology books on that, anthropology books on that, and realized this is something that happens to people. Not a lot of people, but a certain percentage of people all around the world, including down to the near death experience, the dismemberment, the putting back together, the whole thing. The whole thing was like I was reading this and saying, "Oh my God, that happened to me. That was what it was." And I said, "Does that mean that this is the way it's going to be now?" And she showed up and basically said, "Yep, you're my shaman. You work for me. I own you. You work for me, and you are going to serve underserved populations, and that includes people who are in between. That is one of the underserved populations that I serve." And it's been 30 years since then, and I'm now a sixth level shaman in the sixth rank shaman in the Northern Tradition Shamanism Guild. Um, and I'm a professional, and I'm a professional diviner. I take clients, I do all that stuff. And um, people who come to me who are queer and trans and intersex and polyamorous and disabled and in alternative relationships, and think they that no one's going to understand because I get it. I get all of it. And people who are none of those things come to me too. But it makes me especially happy when somebody comes to me who's got a number of those quote unquote axes of offense, as it were, and I am the person who can speak to all of that and who can help them with whatever it is that they need done. I mean, not everything. I'm not a god. I can't fix everything, but I can serve that community, and I can, from a very understanding, non-judgmental way, where I can say, "Yep, yep, I get it. I am that. I am all of that." So, um, in my particular tradition, there is an Old Norse word for someone who's in between, and it's ergi or arger, depending on how you conjugate it. There's some vowel shifts depending on where it is in the sentence, whether you're using the noun or the adjective form. If you read stuff about it, there's stuff from the Christian era, which is highly Christianized and therefore not good, because the medieval Christians did not like anything that was not heterosexual and stereotypically gendered. In fact, many Christians still don't like that. If you read 19th century stuff about ethnographers going to visit Siberian shamans, you get the same thing. Oh, those perverts! They are in between, and yet the more I read about shamanism, the more I realized that we who are in between actually seem to have an advantage. We're found everywhere in that profession. Not that every um, trans person is supposed to be a spirit worker. No, not necessarily. No, it's okay. It doesn't, if it doesn't come and get you, that it doesn't come and get you. But I feel like we are more likely to be gotten by it. for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. But let's just say that the guild that I'm in, the Northern Shamanism Guild, we don't go out and recruit. People come to us and say, the gods of this tradition came to me and said that I needed to do this, and we do a reading, and if that's true, then okay, we'll train you. And there are 3 of us who are intersex in this guild, and that is a very high percentage population-wise. For a guild of maybe 30 people, that's like, wow, that's like 10% who are intersex, and probably twice that who are trans. So, if you look at the sociology, the anthropology of it, yeah, there tends to be a lot of us in spirit work, in a variety of different cultures. So, yeah, and at the same time, the in between gods, the gods who were gender transgressive in some way, they were coming to me and they were talking to me. My goddess that I serve is not gender transgressive, although she is half alive and half dead, so she's sort of an in between creature herself. But Shiva, Baphomet, Aphrodite, Urania, Dionysus, Lilith, even culturally transgressive deities like Athena, shapeshifters like Loki, like Coyote. They were coming to me. Elegua, this sort of thing. They were coming to me and they were saying, so, write about this. Remember what that person told you so long ago? This is sacred, and no one is writing about that. And that is how I managed to write the book Hermaphrodites, the Transgender Spirituality Workbook. And it's both rituals and questions and myths and stories and interviews with strongly spiritual people who are in between. Some are intersex, some are trans, some are both. And it certainly doesn't cover everything. And it was written. I mean, it's a 30-year-old book, so it's been around quite a while. But the truth is still there. We are sacred people. We are sacred people. And that may make you feel profoundly uncomfortable if you're hearing that and you're on the other end of it. But it is true. We are sacred people and we have a job. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a priest. It doesn't mean you're going to be a spirit worker. But it means you have a job. Some kind of spiritual job that's going to come and get you. And that you will be less able to ignore or put off. But I'll stop frightening the audience. Keep going. After all this time, after all these years, my gender identity is intersex. And a lot of intersex people, not all, many are just like, no, I'm male, I'm female. That's fine. I just happen to have a medical condition. That's fine. That's great. But a significant number of us, over the past 30 years or so, started using intersex as an identity. And for me, it certainly is. But it's not an identity in the sense of I decided I was this. It's an identity in the sense of this is my physical reality. Right here, right now. This is my history. This is my physical reality. This has been my life. This is what it is. I can't decide to be this or not be this. I am this. And it shapes so much of what I do. So my sex is intersex in that sense. My sex is intersex. And there was a lot of controversy. Intersex activists have tried very hard to work against the medical system and to educate, and many of them are doing just amazing work. And after a while, the medical system decided to instead to stop using the word intersex, just as hermaphrodite became passé and considered inappropriate. And intersex was in. Now intersex is out. And the new thing is disorders of sex development, DSD. And the reason that term was chosen was largely because it's too clunky for anyone to try to make an identity out of it. It's too clunky to be borrowed and put in the pride parade. because you see that was the problem. People who had intersex identities were now adding them to the LGBTQI. And I'm not going to get into the history of that difficulty and the clashes and all that. All I'm going to say is there was a lot of disagreement as to whether it was okay for IS people to take IS as an identity. And I remember a particularly heartbreaking day when I was sitting at an event and heard some intersex activists that I respected and whose work I respected say that those of you who have taken intersex as an identity and you have put it in, you have stuck it onto LGBTQ and you are marching in the pride parades, you have done a disservice. Because what you've done is you have made frightened parents, especially conservative frightened parents, who have children with ambiguous genitalia, look at that word and think, does this mean my kid's going to be queer? And you are making it more likely that they will mutilate their children to prevent that from happening. That was a very hard thing to hear. It didn't stop me, because that is my reality. And the fact that society teaches wrong things doesn't mean that I'm going to step back from that being my reality. But it was hard to hear. I have an old endocrinology manual that predates intersex activism, and the main reason that is given for why do these surgeries on babies and small children when really, if they were to be done, they could be done so much better and with much hugely better results on adults, on adult side. I mean, there's a lot of problems and complications that happen that shouldn't need to happen because they're doing it on children. But the reason for it isn't that the medical manuals give. It isn't society or anything like that. I mean, that's something. It's certainly there. It's not that that's not there. It is, first and foremost, to not interfere with parental bonding. Yep. And a lot of doctors have said there are parents, I can't send home this child unmutilated because they won't be able to love it. And so it was a hard thing to hear. And so disorders of sex development was chosen, was a term that people weren't going to steal as an identity, and that could be said to parents and not freak them out because it was a word associated with the queers in the Pride Parade. Well, I am one of the queers in the Pride Parade. At this point, I'm polyamorous. I'm pansexual. I have my trans woman wife of 34 years, and I have my trans man partner of 23 years now. It's been a long time. I'm old, so we're basically polyfidelitous. We love each other. We have various other friends with benefits throughout the years, dear friends who, and various partners. It's been a polycule. People have had various and sundry other folks going on. It's all love. It's all wonderful. And you can't look at my family and put a sexual preference gendered label on it. My God, what are we? We're just people who love each other. And yeah, there isn't a label that fixes it. Maybe sort of generally queer. Yeah, it's good though. And I'm an educator. I'm an educator for everything I believe in. I'm an activist for everything I am. And so, of course, I'm biased. I believe that education is our best bet to solve all these problems. We just have to find the right education and maybe wait for a few people to die off. But besides that, we, education is really our key. And that's part of why I'm getting up here and talking about this. Because there's a lot of people out there who literally have no idea what this even is. And I haven't gone into detail about all the different kinds of intersex and all the different aspects of trans or anything like that, because there are other people who are making those videos, writing those books, writing those papers. That's already out there. This is only my story. But to give an example of how there are people who still don't get it and need to hear things. I am the managing editor of three basically authors cooperatives. They're not commercial presses, they're authors cooperatives. And on the side, as a just sort of general side job to make a few dollars, it's a side hustle, I edit people's manuscripts. I'm a professional editor. I edit people's manuscripts. I'll fix it all, copy edit it all nice, make it look all professional, and red pen the hell out of it, and you'll look like you know what you're doing by the time I'm done with your piece. And a woman sent me a manuscript. It was a religious manuscript. Okay, it wasn't exactly my own, but that's all right. And I'm copy editing through it, and I come to this one chapter, and it's on God's mistakes. She mentions God's mistakes. And what does she pick as an example of God's mistakes? But hermaphrodite children. Seriously, I think my jaw dropped when I read that. And she was doing the hyperbole. It was like, how can these people even live? How can these people even have relationships and have real healthy lives? And so I finished copy editing her book because I needed to like think about what I was going to say. I finished her book. And I wrote her an email and said, I realize you had no idea when you submitted me your manuscript to edit that you were going to have an editor who is actually an intersex person. But I assure you, here is resource. You can learn more about this. Here are videos of people talking about this. And I assure you that I have had this all my life, and I am living a fine life. Thank you very much. And I have two wonderful partners and a few friends with benefits. I didn't mention them, but still, two wonderful long-term partners. And I probably get laid more than you do. Inside voice, didn't say that. Inside voice. And everything is fine, and I'm actually a minister in my pagan church and all this stuff, and I'm a shaman, and I do all this stuff, and everything is great, and I consider the fact that I'm intersex to be a gift. Thank you very much. It's a gift, not a curse. And she did come back saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I had no idea, I'm watching stuff I didn't know, I'm like, okay, that's great. And she wanted to swap that out for some other disabilities, and I was like, no, please, I have friends with those disabilities, they're fine too, please, could we not? And I don't know what she finally decided on, but at least it wasn't hermaphrodite children. It was something else. And she basically paid me for my editing work and refused to talk to me again. But at least, she wouldn't listen long enough for me to do any disability education in there. I am also disabled, that not from being intersex, but from the lupus. That's its own issue. But at least I managed to head that one off at the pass. And one of the in-between deities, Baphomet, was like, yeah, I put that in your lap. Yeah, that I threw that in your lap so that you would stop that. You could cut that one off before somebody read it, before it got published and someone read it and got hurt. And this is the kind of thing that happens when you have a life full of spirits. Is this, they give you work all the time. Um, so as I said, I'm a shaman, and this is a highly spiritual thing for me. For me, this is about living between male and female. I live as male in the world because my body really, really likes testosterone, and because I have a certain amount of gender dysphoria, and because when I grew a beard, I actually really liked it. I like my beard. I think my beard is awesome. And when I let my body hair grow, I was like, I like my pelt. My pelt is great. And I didn't like my enormous breasts that had been forced on me by huge amounts of estrogen, and I had them removed, and I'm quite happy with that. And I keep my junk the way it is, partly because there's no surgery that I think would work for me, that would do for me what I want it to do, really. And it's terribly expensive, and as someone with lupus, I really can't have major surgeries unless it's life-threatening, unless there's something very wrong anyway, because my immune system will attack surgery sites. That's a whole different issue. So, and also because while I still sometimes am not thrilled, I would like I'd like to have slightly somewhat different genitals. What I've got works. It's functional. My partners are good with it. It's all I have a very good sex life. I have an excellent sex life, and also, it reminds me I'm both. And while I look like a guy when I go into the hardware store, and I don't talk about it to most people who are merely the cashier behind the counter, or the the waitress who's waiting on me. If someone asks, I'll talk all about it. I'm out. I'm as out as it gets. I've written about it in multiple books that have my name on it. And people know. Lots and lots and lots of people know. Um, a fundamentalist group once said that on one of their websites, that I was the most dangerous transsexual in Massachusetts, which I took as a compliment. I'm not, though. I know activists who are more dangerous than I am in my state. But hey. But to me, being both is a spiritual calling. It's a gift. It means that I can understand a certain amount about maleness and a certain amount about femaleness. It means that I can be something of a bridge. It means that I can be the translator who explains one to the other. My gender identity, I said that my sex is intersex. My gender identity is male of center. Meaning, if there was a Kinsey scale of gender, I would have lived my whole life in the 2 to 4 range, that middle ground, going sort of back and forth over that. And at the moment, it's just male of center. And when I say male of center, people get it, generally. If they know anything, even if they don't, they sort of like, okay. Yes, my pronouns are he, him. It's just easier that way. My gender is male of center. I do not call myself non-binary. I have no problem with anyone else in the world calling themselves non-binary. Go for it. That's fine. I don't feel personally that it fits me, for a variety of reasons. One of those is when I've talked to people who call themselves non-binary. I've got a lot of friends who call themselves non-binary, and when I talk to them, I would say that 90% are not talking about what I would refer to as body dysphoria. They're not talking about the tyranny of having a male body or a female body. They're not talking about being transsexual in that sense, or in the sense of wanting to change your body. They're talking about having role dysphoria. They're talking about not liking the boxes that society puts on us. And granted, the boxes that society puts on us are terrible. They suck. They no question there. But I'm not interested in defining myself by the boxes that society puts on us. I'm not interested in defining myself by that binary, by the social binary. As far as I'm concerned, the social binary means nothing to me. It's something I deal with every time I walk out the door, because we all do. It's something I'm aware of. It's something that I work around, and I cope with, and I avoid, and I face down, and I try to change. But it's not something I'm willing to define my gender around. And also, I'm not willing to define. And I don't have role dysphoria, by the way. There are. I think both the female box, social box, and the male social box are both for shit. They're both really. I mean, there's a few good things on each side, and I reserve the right to pick and choose the good things on each side, and the rest of it's just nonsense. I'll just do what I want to do. And yes, I will pay a price for that. Shamans are not bound by the rules of society. We are bound by the rules of consequence. I will pay a price for that, but okay. And, I pay lots of prices for being myself in other ways too. Okay. We fight it, we educate, we work towards it, we get on with our lives. I'm not defining myself by that system. And I am not defining myself by something I am not. And it's perfectly okay, again, if everyone else in the world decided that they were non-binary. Actually, I think that would be kind of interesting and cool. But I'm not. That is not a term that I am comfortable applying to me. Because all my dysphoria was physical. It was all about the body. And I've 80% fixed it. And the role stuff for me, the social stuff for me, is an unfortunate happening in the world that is there to be changed, but it's not about who I am. Sorry, that's soapbox. Hope I didn't offend too many people there. Again, if it's your label, great, awesome, go for it. Be that person, and may there be many more in the world. But I am intersex and male of center, and a shaman, and an animist, and a polytheist, and I see spirit in everything, and I see that we are all tied together. We are all part of the same big network of life. We're all woven in together, and there is spirit in everything. And there is sacredness in everything, and in this world, and in the physical of this world, the rocks, the trees, the many handmade items, and all our bodies, we are all sacred. But specifically, I'm talking to you. If you're in between, you are sacred. And don't you forget it.